My dead grandma just called me from a landline that's been disconnected since 2003. I swear to God, I almost swallowed my phone whole. It rang 3 times. I was lying in bed, half scrolling through memes, half ignoring my mom's passive-aggressive texts about Sunday dinner. Caller ID flashed Nora Morgan, and I laughed like some kind of sick joke. My grandma's name. Cute. Except that number's been dead longer than some of my ex's dreams, I answered on reflex. And there it was. Her voice. Clear as day. Like she just stepped out of the kitchen, wiped her hands on that faded yellow apron, and decided to check in after 22 years. She only said one thing. You don't know who you are, Cassidy, but you're about to find out. Click. No static. No background noise. Just my stomach flipping like a busted carnival ride and my heart thrashing around like it was late for something important. My name's Cassidy Morgan. I'm 31 years old, live in Portland, and work as a graphic designer for a startup that thinks offering kombucha on tap makes up for criminally low salaries. Emotionally, I hover somewhere between cautiously optimistic and mildly unhinged, depending on whether my cat likes me that day. And yes, I checked. The number was real. I called back, disconnected, no forwarding info. Landline tied to the house my grandmother died in. The same house my family sold after she fell down the stairs. Except no one ever really talked about that, or her, or that house. All I've ever known is that Nora was complicated, not well, and best left in peace. But now, with her voice echoing in my head like some cryptic trailer for a psychological thriller, I can't shake the feeling that everything I thought I knew, about her, about my family, about myself, is total BS. And if that weren't enough, 2 hours after the call, I found an old key in my mailbox. No return address, no note, just a rusted brass key with a faded green ribbon tied around it, and a smell I can't even describe. Old wood, cold iron, dust, and dread. I think it's time I visited the house we weren't supposed to talk about, because apparently I'm the family secret now, and someone, or something, wants me to remember why. You ever get the sense that reality's been edited behind your back? Like the universe hit backspace on your life while you were microwaving leftovers? That was me, standing in front of my dead grandmother's house at 7:43 a.m. on a Wednesday, clutching a mystery key and seriously questioning all my life choices. The place looked like time forgot it. Peeled paint, rotting porch swing swaying with a breeze that didn't exist, and shutters barely clinging to the frame like they were one bad memory away from giving up. I hadn't been here since I was 9, and even then, I was only allowed in the living room. My mom, Deborah, rules are for everyone except me, Morgan, acted like every corner of this house was booby-trapped with PTSD. If I so much as looked toward the back hallway, she'd tighten her grip on my hand and hiss, "We don't go there." Now I was standing on the porch like some bargain bin Nancy Drew, trying to figure out what the hell I'd just stepped into. The key slid into the lock like it had been waiting. The door creaked open, slow and dramatic, like it was auditioning for a horror movie. Inside, it smelled like mildew, lost time, and something sharper. Bleach, old blood. My nose twitched and I gagged. The house hadn't just been abandoned. It had been erased. Furniture was gone, carpet stripped, walls scraped down to raw drywall. But the kitchen, oh, that kitchen was still intact, untouched almost, preserved. The same flowered wallpaper, the same chipped tile, the same ticking wall clock stuck forever at 4:07. I don't know why I walked straight to the fridge. Maybe I thought I'd find a note, or a severed finger, or a decent explanation. Instead, I found the photo. It was taped to the inside of the fridge door, black and white, curled at the edges. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6, standing barefoot in the backyard holding a small shovel, smiling like she'd just buried something important. And behind her, just barely visible, was someone else. A woman, blurry, distant, but unmistakably me. Except I was never there. I'd never worn that dress, never stood in that yard, never held that shovel. So unless I had a time-traveling doppelganger with a penchant for creepy photo ops, something was seriously wrong. I stared at the photo until my fingers went numb. Then I flipped it over. Scrawled in messy, all-caps handwriting were 5 words that made my blood turn to ice. "You know what you buried." I dropped the photo like it burned. My hands were shaking. My breath wouldn't come. Every hair on my body stood up like it was trying to leave. Because the thing is, I do remember burying something here. I just thought it was a dream. And now I'm starting to think I've been lied to about everything, including who I actually am. I used to think the most humiliating moment of my life was accidentally sexting my boss instead of my boyfriend. But nothing compares to realizing your childhood was a carefully edited lie, scripted, directed, and censored by your own mother. After the photo incident, I couldn't sleep. My brain just kept looping that phrase. You know what you buried. And even though I didn't, not exactly, something inside me clearly did. So I called my mom. Deborah answered on the second ring, too chipper to be casual. And when I asked if we could talk in person, she paused and said, "I suppose it's time," like she'd been waiting for this moment and dreading it in equal parts. Her house smelled like overperfumed furniture and forced politeness, the kind of space where nothing loud ever happens because emotions aren't allowed past the front door. We sat at her kitchen table, her mug perfectly centered on the coaster like always, and I skipped the warm-up. "I went to Grandma Nora's," I said, and her hand froze mid-reach for her tea. "That place should have been torn down years ago," she muttered, and when I told her I found a photo, me, in the yard, and someone else behind me, she cut me off. "Stop." Not angry, scared. "I need to know what happened," I told her. "I need to know what I buried." She leaned back like the words hit a nerve she thought had healed, and after a moment of silence, she said, "You were 6, Cassidy. You don't remember because you were never supposed to." I repeated it. "Never supposed to." And she didn't flinch, just let the weight of it land before continuing. "You found a shoebox in the crawl space. No one knows how you got in. It belonged to your grandfather, and it had photos." My stomach dropped. "What kind of photos?" She looked at me, really looked, and I swear I saw the years of shame carved into her expression. Girls, young, too young, Polaroids, dated, labeled. I felt cold all over. "You're serious?" She nodded, fingers tight around her mug. "You took the box outside, dug a hole in the garden, buried it without saying anything except these are bad, they don't belong inside. And then you stopped talking for almost a year. Doctor said it was trauma. I never told them why." I blinked. "Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you report it?" Her voice cracked. "Because it was my father. And your grandmother begged me not to ruin the family. Said they were just photos, that he never acted on anything, that we had to protect what little reputation we had left. And you listened?" I was 23. I had a newborn. I was scared, and I was weak. I stood up, couldn't sit any longer, felt the walls closing in. "So you let him die a free man?" She nodded. "He had a stroke 6 months later. He never knew you found them." I couldn't cry, couldn't yell, couldn't move. I just laughed, sharp and bitter, because what else do you do when your childhood memory turns out to be evidence everyone agreed to forget? So that's what I buried. Not a body, not a crime scene, but proof. Proof my family ignored. Proof even a 6-year-old instinctively knew was wrong. The horror wasn't in the backyard. It was in the silence we were trained to protect. And now I'm the only one left who remembers. I didn't go home after that conversation. I drove around aimlessly for over 2 hours, pretending I had errands to run. But really, I was just trying to stay in motion so the weight of everything wouldn't catch up and flatten me. I ended up at this sad little diner off Route 14, the kind with cracked red booths, ancient jukeboxes that only play Roy Orbison, and waitresses who call everyone hun, whether you deserve it or not. I sat by the window and ordered coffee I didn't want just so I'd have something to hold on to. The photo was still in my bag, the one I found in Grandma Nora's fridge. I kept pulling it out, staring at it like maybe it would blink and tell me something, but it just sat there, frozen in time. A 6-year-old me smiling like I hadn't just uncovered the ugliest truth imaginable. And here's the part I can't stop thinking about. I buried it, not just the shoebox, the memory. Like a good little Morgan, I learned how to keep things buried. I texted my best friend Harper, not the whole story, just a vague, "Can we talk later?" with a shaky smiley to mask the panic. She replied in seconds with, "Of course, always." I almost cried right there in the booth. The waitress brought the check without asking. Maybe she could smell the breakdown on me. I tipped her $20 on a $5 coffee and got back in the car. I should have gone home. Instead, I drove to the city records office. Yeah, I don't know what came over me either. Something in me needed proof that what my mom said was real, that it wasn't just one of those family myths twisted by guilt and time. I gave the guy at the desk my grandma's old address and asked for any records tied to the property. He squinted at me like I was asking for nuclear codes, then disappeared for a full 20 minutes. When he came back, he slid a manila folder toward me like it might bite. Inside were copies of the deed transfers, tax assessments, one code violation for unsafe electrical work, and an incident report from 1987. Handwritten, faded, hard to read, but one line stopped me cold. Unregistered structure found behind residence. Dismantled by family at request of CPS. Child was not removed from home. A structure. What structure? I flipped through again. Nothing else. No follow-up. No names. I was born in 1992. Whatever happened in 87, someone made damn sure it never made it into any family stories. I took a picture of the report and left. Heart racing. Head spinning. I didn't even remember a structure in that yard. Just the garden. The swing. The silence. What else did they hide? And why the hell does part of me feel like I already know? I couldn't stop thinking about that line in the report. Unregistered structure found behind residence. 5 words, and somehow they managed to hijack my entire sense of reality. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with the light on, heart thudding in my ears, playing back every memory I had of that backyard. The swing, the garden, the cracked concrete path, but there was one blank spot in the far corner. I always thought it was just overgrown grass and shrubs. Turns out it used to be something else. By morning, I'd made my decision. I was going back. The house wasn't locked, still empty, still too quiet. The air felt heavier this time, like the walls were waiting for me to remember something I'd spent my whole life avoiding. I stepped outside through the back door and stood at the edge of the yard, staring at that far corner. Weeds were waist high. There was no obvious trace of anything ever being there. No foundation, no debris, nothing. But the ground looked disturbed, uneven in a way that didn't match the rest of the lawn, like something had been covered up in a hurry. I started pulling at the weeds with my bare hands. No gloves, just this obsessive need to see what was underneath. After about 20 minutes of scratching and sweating, I hit something solid. Wood. Rotten. Blackened. Soft in places. But definitely wood. I dug deeper. It was a floorboard. Just one. Part of something larger once. Now sunken and mostly swallowed by dirt. I kept digging until I uncovered the edge of a concrete slab. Maybe 3 feet wide. Maybe 4. My hands were shaking. Then I found the latch. Rusty. Almost invisible. But there. I stared at it for a long time before touching it. Part of me didn't want to know. The smarter part. But curiosity has always been my most dangerous trait. It didn't open easily. Took everything I had to yank it loose. The hatch creaked, then gave way, revealing a hole no wider than a crawl space and maybe 4 feet deep. Inside were boxes. Cardboard. Crumbling. Some partially collapsed from moisture. The first one disintegrated when I touched it, revealing dozens of envelopes. Sealed, yellowed, all addressed the same way. To whom it may concern. The second box held cassette tapes. Old, unlabeled, moldy in places. There had to be at least 30. But the third box, the one that made me sit back and cover my mouth, was filled with tiny shoes. Children's shoes, different styles, different sizes. All dirty, all old. I felt sick. My hands were filthy. My knees hurt. My heart felt like it was trying to claw out of my chest. I couldn't breathe through the nausea. Who keeps a box of kids' shoes buried behind their house? I couldn't even move at first. I just sat there staring at them. Like maybe if I stared long enough, the answer would surface gently, but it didn't. I took one tape with me, the cleanest one. And when I got home, I found an old player in the back of my closet, one of those junk tech boxes I always meant to throw out. I hit play. The audio was muffled at first. Then a woman's voice came through. Soft, measured, calm. Nora. Patient record number 34, session 7, child remains uncooperative. No verbal response, repetition of name ineffective, possible trauma response, or selective disassociation. We will resume observation after sedation. Then, a pause, and a child's voice. Please, I want to go home now. Click. I sat there in silence for a long time because I recognized that voice. It was mine. I didn't cry. Not when I heard the tape. Not when I turned off the player. Not even when I curled up on the floor next to a box of tangled extension cords and a stack of old college notebooks, trying to remember how to breathe like a normal person. Shock is weird like that. It doesn't feel like panic. It feels like stillness, like being buried alive in your own thoughts. The next day I called Harper. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. I just said I needed a voice that didn't sound like mine. She picked up instantly. No questions. Just that familiar sigh of someone ready to hold space for you, even if they have no idea what they're stepping into. We ended up getting coffee at our usual spot, a little place with sticky tables and the best cinnamon scones in the state. I watched people come and go, laughing, arguing, tapping on laptops, like the world hadn't just split open under my feet. Harper didn't press. She just waited. After a few minutes, I said, "My family's been lying to me." She nodded, slow, like she'd been expecting that sentence in some form since 2015. Big lie or emotional bruise that festered into a grudge kind of lie? Somewhere between both, I said. Like, it started as a secret and turned into a rewrite. She sipped her drink and said, "Want to tell me what page we're on?" So I told her. Not everything. Not the shoes. Not the tape. Just enough. The house. The boxes. My mom's confession. The silence I apparently carried since I was 6. She listened without interrupting, except for a quiet Jesus here and there. When I finally stopped, she leaned back and said, "Cass, you don't sound shocked. You sound like someone who's just now remembering a movie she watched in pieces." And that's exactly what it felt like. The images weren't new. They were just finally clicking into place. My odd fears as a kid, the way I used to flinch when men raised their voices, the fact that I couldn't sleep with closet doors open until I was in college. All the moments I thought were just quirks. They weren't. They were fragments of something deeper. Harper said, "So what are you going to do?" I didn't have an answer. Still don't. Because here's the thing they never tell you about learning the truth. It doesn't automatically set you free. Sometimes it just gives you a clearer view of the chains, and mine are everywhere. I didn't go back to the house for 3 days. I told myself I needed space, time to think. But the truth is, I was scared, not of what I'd find, but of what I already knew and hadn't admitted to myself yet. When I finally pulled back into the driveway, it felt like stepping into someone else's memory. Everything looked the same, which somehow made it worse. Like the past was just sitting there waiting patiently. I brought gloves, a flashlight, and a notebook. I wasn't digging blind this time. I went straight to the hatch in the backyard, opened it like I'd done it 100 times. The air was still thick, heavy with mildew and something sour, like forgotten grief. I sat at the edge, breathing through my mouth, staring at those boxes again, the ones I didn't touch last time. The envelopes were first, all sealed, all identical. No stamps, no return address, just "to whom it may concern" scribbled in shaky handwriting. I opened the first one carefully, expecting more photos or maybe a confession. But it was a report, typed, dated 1993. Subject, observation notes, CMCM, my initials. The language was clinical, cold. It described behaviors, responses to stimuli, resistance to commands, as if I weren't a child, just a case file. I read phrases like repeated defiance during compliance drills, verbal refusal to accept conditioning, and exhibited difficulty forming attachment. It was me, but not written by my mother, not even my grandmother. The signature at the bottom, Dr. Nora Morgan. She wasn't just my grandmother. She was my evaluator. I felt my stomach twist. I looked at the other envelopes. Dozens of them. Reports spanning years. All centered around me. One had a photo attached. I turned it over slowly. It was me, maybe 4 years old, asleep on a metal table. Wires taped to my temples, eyes closed, arms strapped down with soft restraints. There was a note stapled to the corner. Remind subject that sleep is a privilege. I dropped it. Something cracked inside me, something I'd been holding together with duct tape and denial. I started crying, not loud or messy, just this silent, stunned kind of crying that burns through your bones. She used me. She didn't just watch me for a while when I was little. She studied me, treated me like a lab rat, in her own house, in her own backyard, and everyone else. My mother, my uncle, the church friends who used to visit, they must have known something. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to feel uneasy, enough to look away. I was never the quiet kid by accident. I was trained not to speak. That's what I buried, not just memories, but the version of myself that was never allowed to exist. And now that version wants out. I didn't tell anyone what I found. Not Harper, not my therapist, not even myself, not really. I just walked out of that yard, got in my car, and drove until my gas light came on. When I finally stopped, I was parked behind an old gas station 30 miles from town, eating a bag of stale pretzels and staring at my own reflection in the rearview mirror like I didn't quite recognize the person looking back. I didn't look broken. I didn't look traumatized. I just looked tired, like someone who'd been holding their breath for 25 years and didn't know what to do with the air now. I ended up at the library of all places. I needed quiet. I needed order. I needed something that didn't feel like it was built on secrets and blood. I went to the archive section, not because I had a plan, but because I was chasing a feeling that maybe if I could just piece together one more part of this story, it would finally start to make sense. I searched my grandmother's name, Dr. Nora Morgan. There wasn't much. A few references in old newsletters, mentions of a private research initiative in child behavior funded quietly through some now defunct nonprofit. No journal articles, no published studies, just scraps. Like someone had done a good job erasing her paper trail without fully deleting the ghost of her work. One thing did stand out, though. A newsletter from 1990. Behavioral Ethics and Early Development. A panel discussion with Dr. N. Morgan. No transcript, just a summary. It described her as innovative, unflinching, and unafraid to explore controversial techniques in conditioning and attachment theory. It also mentioned that her work had been moved to a private facility in 1991 due to funding cuts and public scrutiny. Private facility. I sat there for a long time, rereading the words, wondering if facility was just code for that locked space behind the garden, wondering how many other subjects she'd studied before me or after. But even more than that, I wondered how much my mom really knew. I used to think she was just a passive accomplice, scared, young, in over her head. Now I wasn't so sure, because she'd said something during that first conversation, something I hadn't fully registered until now. He never knew you found them. She meant the photos, the shoebox. But the way she said it, she wasn't just covering up his shame. She was protecting something bigger, a system, a pattern, maybe even a legacy. I thought this was about one man's hidden sickness. Now I'm starting to think it was a whole family project. And the silence? It wasn't an accident. It was a rule. I always thought the worst part of secrets was the not knowing, the questions, the missing pieces, the empty space. But I was wrong. The worst part is what comes after you finally know everything. Because once you see it, really see it, there's no going back to who you were before. The silence doesn't protect you anymore. It suffocates. I called my mother. This time she didn't sound surprised. She just said, "I figured this was coming." I didn't waste time. "I know what Grandma did. I found the reports, the tapes. I know she experimented on me, and I think you let it happen." There was a long pause on the line. Then, "I was trying to survive, Cassidy." "No," I said. "You were trying to protect her. She was my mother, and I was your child." The words hung there, heavy, sharp, final. She didn't argue. She didn't apologize either. "I did what I thought I had to," she said. "No, you did what was easy." She sighed, tired, small. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need anything from her anymore. Not an explanation. Not even an apology. What I needed was distance. So I said, "We're done. I don't want you in my life. I don't want your stories. I don't want your guilt." She didn't fight me. She just said, "I understand." And maybe, in her own warped way, she did. I hung up, blocked her number, sat in my kitchen with the lights off and the window open, letting the air carry it all away. Later that night, I opened a blank document on my laptop, titled it, "What We Bury," and I started writing. Not for revenge, not to expose, just to finally put it somewhere outside of me. Because healing, it turns out, isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's small. It's walking into a room and not flinching. It's drinking coffee without your hands shaking. It's hearing your name and not feeling like it belongs to someone else. I still have questions. I probably always will. But I'm not afraid of the silence anymore, because I broke it. And now that it's gone, I can finally hear myself again.